Are you ready? Thank you so much for coming. Thanks everyone for coming to hear Prageeta Sharma and Dodie Bellamy read and have a conversation at the Poetry Center tonight on this smoky San Francisco evening. Um, oh, when if you have any questions over the course of the events, there's an icon, the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Just type them in. Thanks. And there's somewhere to look for real-time captions too. Now we'll start. There's a poignant photograph in the Village Voice with Dodie Bellamy's astounding, candid, and moving piece, My Mixed Marriage, June 20th, 2000. The photo, Dodie Bellamy and her husband, Kelvin Killian. In this piece, she writes, I felt like we were two people in mutual need. You can see it in the photograph. Just Google the voice. Fast forward 20 years to her candid and moving piece, Anniversary in Art Forum, June 15th, 2020, where Bellamy begins with Monday, June 15th, is the anniversary of the death of writer Kevin Killian, who was my husband for 33 years. She writes, widowhood is an anti-space. There is the world, there is you. The connections are erratic and confusing. I was embarrassed by my incompetence at keeping it all together. I still am. There is no finality in matters of the heart, she says, just to Sarah Todd in Girls Like Giants. Bellamy writes that language is about separation. Writing is always equally about loss and gain. It gives you the world when you're writing, but you're writing about things that aren't there. So it's always about loss. The gain is form. In an interview with Lucy Ives in the White Review, she says, form is political, it's not neutral. Bellamy's writing focuses on sexuality, politics, and narrative experimentation. She has many books, writes for art journals like Art Forum and Freeze, and for artists' catalogs, teaches at San Francisco State University and the California College of the Arts, and at her private workshop. Diana Cage, Dodie's assistant when she was the director of small press traffic in the late 90s, a Bay Area reading series, said, Dodie is the first place where I actually understood that female desire was a thing that needed to be described. This place grew to be the Dodie Bellamy Institute, the CCA portal at the Watts Institute, where she was the 2018 and 2019 subject of the On Our Mind program, a year-long series of public events, commissioned essays, and reading group meetings inspired by the artist's writing and life work, which is now a book. Dodie Bellamy is on our mind. From a new manuscript titled Bereaved, she writes, with everyone alone, the aloneness of her mourning is violated. Here is Bay Area luminary Dodie Bellamy.
Thank you, Norma. That was really lovely. And yeah, I'm going to read from this piece called Bereaved, and that's the name of the main character. And there are going to be three of these. This is the middle one. The third one I'm working on right now. And this one's called Plague Widow. And what I did, due to our time constraints, is that I just went in and excerpted about half of it, but it's not like continuous. I just it's basically an abridged version of the whole piece. And I feel really uncomfortable reading this, just to let you know. Okay, Plague Widow. And also, thank you, Steve, and the Poetry Center for hosting me. And I'm just thrilled to be reading with Prageeta. Okay, Plague Widow. There's shit and piss. Okay, just let me tell you the backstory because I did cut like a lot at the beginning, but basically it's about living with a cat that has terminal intestinal cancer, a lot of it. So that's like set up, and I think everything else is really set up. I make a reference to those holes in the toilet paper, the rolls in here, and that's set up at the beginning because I would never just bring it in without setting it up. Okay, Plague Widow. There's shit and piss all over the place. It's useless. Bereaved is barely able to manage a shower, to organize, take her clothes to the wash and fold, feed herself, get anything done. She found herself bragging to Donna that she changes her underpants every day. She feels old and irrelevant as the characters in the final episode of the French TV series A French Village, 2009 to 17. For 5 seasons, their town was occupied by Nazis. Life as they knew it was over. They were doing their best, and then comes the liberation, and they're condemned as collaborators. They walk through a France they no longer recognize, wearing really bad old people makeup. That's how aging feels to be, like she's a young person trapped beneath sagging prosthetics. TV assures her that dying never means the end. Through the pornography of flashbacks, Marcel is no longer executed by a German firing squad. Marie is no longer lynched in the town square, her body left hanging in a tree as a warning to other mouthy women. When they were alive, Bee would huff at how irritating Marcel and Marie could be. But when they return from the dead, her love for them is unstoppable. It's been over a year, and Kevin's ashes remain on the floor of the living room closet in the package they arrived in, unopened. Binging on 72 episodes of A French Village, V expects all the French she took in college to suddenly kick in, and she'd understand what the villagers and Nazis were saying. But it didn't happen until the court case. The lawyers, with their over enunciation, sounded like the recordings she listened to ad nauseum in language lab. The violence and humiliations those occupied endured, their resistance, their living off of soup and chestnut puree, their grief and passionate sex with the wrong people. All that remains subtitled gibberish, but the lawyer's denatured bureaucratic French anybody could understand. She washes her face the YouTube esthetician recommended 60 seconds, singing the alphabet song twice to mark the time. They've recently changed the rhythm of the alphabet song. Instead of LMNOP, it's now LMNOP. Each letter enunciated as distinctly as a French lawyer. One guy complained they changed the ABC song to clarify the LMNOP part, and it is life ruining. And his tweet was like 105,000 times. B walks from room to room, eyes fixed on the floor, nothing. Then she checks her office. Underneath her desk is a box of beans from her bean club that has been sitting there for several months. Across the cellophane bag of green lentils, she wipes a blotch of runny shit. She picks up as much as she can with a tissue, wipes off the green lentils with a paper towel, and throws the lentils in the trash. She wipes off a smaller blob on the edge of the real zapes, opens the other end of the bag, and empties the beans into a bowl. The other bags seem to have had minimal contact. She searches for 5 empty quart mason jars, finds 3 clean ones, 1 dirty, and she empties out another containing musty flaked coconut. She washes the 2 jars, dries them with a towel, then blasts them with her hairdryer. Then she transfers the rest of the beans into jars: yellow eyes, black caviar lentils, wild rice, vaqueros. She thinks of Psyche, separating the lentils from the beans and grains, one of the many tasks she performs after sputtering the lamp oil on Eros's thigh. There's more cat shit on the sisal rug, more shit packed into the complicated wheels of her Herman Miller chair. Bee fetches a scrub brush and a bowl of warm water. The more she wipes, the deeper the shit burrows into the sisal fibers. Bee can't remember what happens to Psyche when her tasks are completed. She gets something that she is now worthy of, but what is it? After their first week of lockdown, her friends were already feeling bored and lonely, and even though they didn't admit it to her, afraid. They were texting her day and night, and the flakiest among them was urgent to make a FaceTime date. When it comes to aloneness, they're such amateurs, whereas B is a pro. Widows are the prima donnas of aloneness. She wants to tell these masked babies, don't worry about it being more than you can endure, because if that happens, you'll go into shock. And when you're hit with unendurable loss, shock is the most wonderful gift. Reality, your feelings, memory, the horror of your situation are on the other side of this long, narrow tunnel. You couldn't reach them if you tried. All that muck is replaced by calm. Behind your stumbling words and confusion, and even your tears, there is calm and erasure. She wrote in her journal those early days that Kevin ever existed is harder to grasp than his loss. With everyone alone, the aloneness of her mourning is violated. She's the one who's supposed to be wearing the widow's weeds, the special one who's set apart, who receives and banishes visitors, capricious as a queen. The plague is stealing her thunder. It's as if Bee's grief has seeped out and filled the world. Her isolation is now the human condition. She watches the end of the world, wizened, hunched over, doing whatever it takes, foraging mushrooms and berries, squeezing sustenance out of a mere strip of bark. She places the empty toilet paper tube of American culture over her mouth and chants, "Rooty toot toot." For everything B wrote since the early 80s, up until the week he died, Kevin was the first reader. As she writes now, it's like he's still there, his brain racing with ideas. She finds herself reworking passages with edits he would have made. Derek McCormick told her that after his horrific experience with cancer, the way he wrote beforehand no longer made sense. He had to figure out a new way of writing. B thinks about this at least once a day. Is the same true for her? Derek underwent an arduous surgery in which hot chemo was sloshed throughout his abdomen. B Googled the procedure. Its slang term is shake and bake. Shake for the swishing and bake for the heat of the chemo. The cruelty of the epitaph shocks B. This is the humor of someone who has seen too much, too often. Someone who is struggling to maintain their humanity. All that pent-up terror and rage, it explodes inside you or is ejected in a burst of uproarious spittle. To laugh at chaos is to fuck chaos. B texts Donna A photo of the urine-soaked asphalt beside her car from when she went for a walk in the Castro. Because of COVID, there are no toilets anywhere. When she returned to her car, she had to pee so bad that right there, right in the busy residential neighborhood, she sat sideways in the driver's seat, half in, half out of the car, pulled down her pants, and pissed on the street. Donna replies that her urine photo is, quote, the most superb text I have ever received in my entire life. She particularly enjoys the, quote, rogue drops of urine on the footboard of the car, exclamation point. Completely, utterly sublime. Bravo, madame. Bra fucking vo. Just as Bee is about to fall asleep, she smells something. She gets up and follows the scent, but she can't find anything. She turns on the flashlight of her iPhone, gets on her hands and knees and looks under the bed, a pile of diarrhea. Even if she lies on the floor in her stomach, she cannot reach it. So she frantically scans her brain for something, anything that can be repurposed as a long-handled scooper. By the time she's cleaned it up, sort of, she's so wound up, sleep is hopeless. She retrieves her laptop, logs into Hulu, and continues watching Season 5, Episode 12 of A French Village. Villeneuve has been liberated and chaos reigns. A mob of townspeople accuse Hortense of being a kraut whore. They spit on her, strike her, chase her barefoot through the street, haul her in a cart to the town square, where a chair appears for Hortense to sit in as rustic men hack away at her blazing red hair with scissors. It's a carnival. Everybody laughing and hooting and craning their necks for a better view, children included. Hortense sits tense and unmoving, bottling her terror inside. She wasn't a whore. She was in love with her Nazi, the top Nazi in charge of the town's occupation. In the midst of grim bureaucracy, they staged a grand, problematic love affair, much more exciting than those of the repressed Party First communists. The fury of the townspeople is fueled by their jealousy over all the beautiful clothes, booze, and gourmet food lavished on Hortense when most of them were starving. The Nazi was charismatic and refined. He and Hortense were thrillingly vivid together. Great on-screen chemistry, Kevin would have said. Even after the Nazi tortured Hortense, he was never portrayed as a nice guy. Bee found herself longing for them to be together. The series often made Bee cringe at her own desires. Nothing is simple and everything is impure. The hair clipping is finally done. Hortense's ragged bald head accentuates the gaunt angularity of her cheekbones. The camera peers in even closer, filling the screen with bloodshot eyes ringed with clumpy smeared mascara, rivulets of tears flowing downward. Medieval French proverb, dogs keep on pissing and women keep on weeping. During the liberation of France, 20,000 women were accused of collaborating, aka sleeping, with the German invaders. Like Hortense, they were publicly humiliated. Some were kicked to death in the streets. Bee first learned of these women from the song Shaved Women, 1979, by British anarcho-punk band Crass. The lyrics to Shaved Women are minimal and repetitive, mostly shaved women collaborators and screaming babies. On the back of the record's cover is a photograph of a shaved woman who is surrounded by a jeering mob as she walks through Chartres holding her German baby. Just when it seems obvious that the time frame of the song is the 1940s, the lyrics dip into a more modern era. Shaved women shooting dope. Shaved women disco dancing. Women who shave their bodies in order to conform to a heteronormative dating aesthetic. Is that too a form of collaboration? When Eve Libertine belts out screaming babies, she enunciates screaming at normal register and babies at a shriek. And if I was Anne Waldman, I would do the shriek, but I'm not. Screaming babies, screaming babies, screaming babies over and over. The words grow silly and frantic, a hysterical chant that fuses horror and comedy. The lyrics online read babies screaming rather than screaming babies. If the online lyrics are correct, in Libertine's rendition, there is a weird pause between babies and screaming, an unnatural syncopation reflecting a world order that is out of whack. When Libertine shouts shaved women collaborators, it's not clear if she's critiquing the torture of these women or if she's assuming the position of someone in the crowd announcing their arrival, their shame. The song dips into multiple positions at once, and all of them are shattered. Shaved Women doesn't need the extended melodrama of a French village to create anti-meaning. The song throws us into the heart of an irreducible frenzy that hails everything and nothing. Bea was too shy and anal for the San Francisco punk scene, but she envied the women. They got to be nasty. Nasty as men, nasty as children. The daughter of a construction worker, Bea was raised to be nasty. Ribald, oversexed, and underclass, she came across as a baby boomer wife of Bath. Employers and local literati alike recoiled from her. Her writing mentors, who were Marxists, told her that writing was a middle-class occupation. If you want to be a writer, they said, you need to learn to be more middle class. Since then, she's learned to behave herself, mostly. When you stick a dog in a tutu, a ballerina you do not make. A nasty woman never stops being nasty. She just ceases to bother. Instead of going to sleep, Bea sits up in bed with her phone and Googles wife of Bath feces. While the wife of Bath makes more references to urine than any other pilgrim, she never mentions shit. Bea reads that Chaucer wrote her that way because back then, quote, anti-feminist traditions often represented women as liquid, dripping creatures. Listening to screaming babies on repeat, Bea imagines a reversed engineered version of herself, a vulgar girl who is no longer a shame, a girl whose words go boom, 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 their thuds so dense they decimate those who would straitjacket her. Bea has the leak of widowhood upon her. She goes forth impenetrable, one of those hard-edged women who, having lost everything important to her, can now shuffle through adversity unfazed. Like those old ladies in her childhood neighborhood, widows who fled the persecution of World War II, DPs her father called them. The kind of widow who, when her toilet is clogged, rolls up a sleeve of her house dress, plunges her arm in the bowl and roots out the impaction with her hand. An aproned widow who acts like she'll kill you if you step on her lawn. A widow doesn't care if she's alone, doesn't care if she's fat and old and undesirable, doesn't even care if she dies. The cat stops in the doorway and makes a sloppy balloon popping sound. Crouching with her ass puffed up out like a blowfish, her front legs extended, she releases an explosion of diarrhea, then walks away. Bea's senses are assaulted over and over and over. Brute repetition replaces an entire system of meaning. That doesn't stop Bea from reading messages in all of this. The cat is saying, I'm an animal. I will not be personified, will not be contained by your bourgeois expectations, will no longer pretend that the institution of pet is not a form of slavery. That night, Kevin comes to her. It's one of those untranslatable dreams that instantly erase themselves. Bea cries out, struggling to stay inside the dream. His loss, a leaden wedge spreading over everything. The alarm rings and she gets up and walks toward the back of the apartment. In the living room, there is a main dump, then a patch of smaller satellite dumps across the room. In the kitchen, A smattering of smooth brown drops are arranged like petals of a flower masterfully stitched on a linen cloth. She just misses stepping in it. In the morning, as she feeds her, groggy and irritable, the cat cries desperately. The cat throws herself in front of Bee's feet as she walks to a cabinet to fetch a can of Mac and Jack. The cat has no sense of past or future, no logic, no patience, a ball of rumbling it. The cat makes the slightest squeaky meow, and Bee knows to turn the kitchen chair in the optimal position for her to jump on the chair, then onto the table. As Bee strokes her with a soft boar bristle brush, the cat purrs wildly. She says, "I love you, my little poopy poo." So that's it. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, take a breath. And now, uh, Prageeta Sharma, you'll have seen from the announcements for this reading that Prageeta Sharma is the author of several poetry collections, the most recent of which is Grief Sequence. She is the founder of the ongoing conference, Thinking Its Presence, Race, Creative Writing, Literary Studies, and Art, developed to deeply consider visibility for people of color and indigenous writers, artists, scholars, and thinkers. Sharma says we're focused on that visibility and solidarity and awareness. A recipient of the 2010 Howard Foundation Award, she has taught at the University of Montana and now teaches at Pomona College. In her intense conversation with Thora Simpson in 2017 on the Creative Independent, talking about grief sequence, Sharma says, the poem is a timeless place where you can go into the spaces that you may not have been able to socially or emotionally. She wanted to go there without filters. You have a great loss, you grieve. If you're a poet, you write poetry, elegiac poetry. But from her interview with Cassandra Cleghorn, elegy was too contrived, too elegant. I wanted these poems to match the state of feeling and of difficulty I felt in its messiness. In her conversation with C.R. Grimmer, the poetry vlog host, she said that elegy was too crafted. I wanted to find a way for the lyric eye to not be in control of the subject matter. Sharma wanted the poem to be outside of the speaker's control. I am having trouble today. I traveled to Seattle. That was in February 2020, before sheltering in place, before lockdown. Sharma and the poetry vlog host were together at this cozy little table, drinking tea or coffee, and never questioning that fact. Am I right? Chelsea Grimmer asked Prageeta what she was working on now. The new book, One Mint One. One Mint relates to abstract expressionist painter Barnett Newman's series of one mints. Sharma, feeling joy again. One, WON. One Mint One. She was also reading with her students the Katha Upanishads, a Vedic philosophical text. This knowledge cannot not be attained by reasoning, the text says. Abstract painting, holistic and philosophical thought, only through poetry, a serious practice of poetry. Please welcome Prageeta Sharma.
I think you can, okay, I think you can see me. You can hear me. Thanks so much, Norma. That was really beautiful. I really appreciate it. And it's also so lovely to be reading with Dodi. And Dodi, I just love that piece. And I feel so grateful that I was able to read the whole thing. And it really inspired me to put this reading together. I thought I would also read some things out of my comfort zone. I appreciated where we went in Dodi's work, but I think of how it feels to read things that make you feel vulnerable. I also like speaking to that state of widowhood too, and to ideas of what I will call complicated spiritual grief. So I thought I would center this reading just around the concept of complicated spiritual grieving, and I'll explain it a little bit, though it seems obvious. I'm going to just read the epigram from Roland Barthes' Morning Diary, which inspired me to kind of see myself through this book. Not to suppress mourning, suffering, the stupid notion that time will do away with such a thing, but to change it, transform it, to shift it from a static stage, stasis, obstruction, recurrences of the same thing, to a fluid state. So I'm really fond of the Poetry Center. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, everybody. I actually read these two poems that I am beginning with at the Poetry Center in May of 2015, 5 months after Dale died, and they helped me develop a direction for this manuscript. So I thought I would start with them because they guide me through other topics. I don't even know if they had titles then. Complicated Spiritual Grief, Part 1. It was violent and it wasn't. It was violent because it was the kind of cancer to which people refer as beastly, as pure evil. And though I do not really believe in a Christian God or devil, I was left facing one. I'm a non-believer. When I faced it, all I had was his past before the cancer and what it was leading up to, which led me down his rabbit hole, which may have included a brain tumor and many other tumors, all the spindly parts, tumor-shaped, even things painted for me by his admirers, some faulty, some careless, spindly grievers. I couldn't look at any of them as they kept metastasizing, but that was an action I knew was not mine to claim, but through my affections for my beloved. How could I not love some of his friends or students? How is it that I settle on these feelings as he disappears? Dale and I would sometimes teach together. So I was teaching a class on Polanski and Cassavetes at the time that I was kind of recalling this, some memories in here. Complicated Spiritual Grief, Part 2. Because I'm the kind of non-believer who believes in the culture around me, I was watching for fragments to arise out of our habits, such as watching Mad Men or thinking about Mad Men, as Dale always said. Men who are always falling from buildings out of fear, anguish, alcoholism, a particular self-destruction from self-annihilation, pinhole pains. Like in Cassavetes' Husbands, there were these men. I found his notes for teaching that film, and at first I thought it was his personal confession, but it wasn't. It was a list of teaching notes. Infidelity, vomiting, being a father, being a husband. I thought about his sonic piece titled Sorry About the Rage. I was sorry about it too. So what now? I grieve. I lust for company that I can't ask for. I turn into my own madman. Can I do this? Did he enter my body, his energy? Can I be him, lusting for himself? I have just a strange screen, so I can't really see myself, but I guess that's fine. Maybe I'm just going to do gallery view. Okay, that's okay. This is just a list poem that starts off a next section of sequences. It's a little conceptual. Learning without knowing, implicit. Loving, explicit. Dying, explicit. Organizing, implicit. Institutional hate, implicit. Grieving, explicit. Compromise, implicit. Dreaming, organizational. Staying in house, implicit. Leaving house, explicit. Sequence, then recursion. This one I hardly read out loud, but when I was reading Dodie's piece, which I love so much, she was talking about Kevin visiting in dreams, and also I just loved Kevin and his work, and just admire them both so much. So I thought I would. This is a dream sequence, or it's about dreams, and it was really. I had very few dreams where Dale was really active in them. So I tried to document everything I could. Sequence 6. In this one, as a kind of lecherous husband who's too affectionate to me, parsing my sleeves and random people at restaurant inching toward, and then as we plod through a train station, and yet he is alive and healthy. It relieves me, but he is always a bit turned in and drunk, which puts me on edge. We are driving and seeing people come forward into view with serenity to greet us. They remain blank and unclear. He exudes a jolly sense of humanness, not bothered by any lack of anonymity. In this one, he and I lived in a kind of Missoula, Brooklyn, and we're going to clean the house, but I went to get a Pinot Noir instead. He started to clean the bookshelves and our entertainment system, full of pollen and dust. This was a light one where Dale and I had some beginnings again, the grain of spots on a photograph. He looked late 40s. He was cheerfully cleaning like a bartender. And then he joined me and picked out a wine from our shop. He wore his gray vest and a pale color overcoat. It was like we were in a Nan Goldin Dickens novel, he said, but there was happiness above our heads. In this one, we were in a kitchen that didn't look like the one we had. Dale asked me for hot washcloths for him to spit in, and I warmed them, different ratty colors. He was sitting by me smoking, and for a moment it wasn't him smoking, and I said Dale got sick because he was smoking. But then it was him again, and I was giving him washcloths. He was shaking his head no. In this one, I read the word wretch, magnified, and remembered that he had started to scare me first with manic drunk hiccups, 10 full minutes, that turned to retching, recurring, till it was a choke, then blood. Then he grew into a harmonic shadow, horizontal and also vertical. And then when he tried to say he loved me, he told somebody else. In this one, Dale was back. It was because somehow he could live a little longer. There is a hallway light. It is a passageway. We lie together in bed to do this. First, we were in a mountain hospital. Dale asking to look at our vows, which I told him were still in my closet somewhere. We came back to the house that wasn't ours, but had all these large, jagged books that were 3 feet tall and upright. And Dale said, "Are you really getting rid of our things?" I said, "I'm just sorting through them." Dale holding tighter than he has strength for, and I said, "I have to be stronger this next year before you go again." In this one, sick, alive, dead, gasping, task analysis, hiding sickness, hiding emotional affair, cutting emotional affair off, diagnosis, hiding hiding prognosis, hiding mortality estimate, hiding addiction, hiding cause of death, multilateral versus sequencing, hiding emotional fare till I read an unerased text after death, text about love and cuddling not written to me, hiding impotence for the last 5 years, hiding death from me, hiding ferment, hiding unconscious states and leaving me behind, hiding our loved place, hiding it from both of us. I will dream it back. In this one, I'm exposed, and I knew it was the last thing you ever wanted for me, to feel so abandoned like a Victorian book. More than I realized, you left me to the wolves, but I, as you would say, turned everything to fairy dust. I had to. I found a surreal sea of ochre. I found a way. And this is about loving two people. I look at your handwriting. I look at your handwriting and it pushes space into its narrow field. His were big atmospheric box crosses with architecture. Your speech and talk are the opposite. You have soft catalectic vowels. His were hard chains of dream speak. How is this possible? What is richly characterized by handwriting? What is its dictionary of attributes? Where is there an airy space between the way he and I loved? Because then, and suddenly, I loved again, and it arose against sequential time. This makes loving two persons its own counsel. One followed the other, but there is still simultaneity. The other one loved me, but had trouble loving, and I had to absorb this after death. There is love without knowing, and loving with so much knowing. Two bodies separate in the night after the coupling of evening time. One goes up to his room and slowly dies, cigarette after cigarette. After his feeding tube and bile duct were inserted, he wouldn't sleep in our bed. The two broad categories of sequence learning exist, explicit and implicit, with subcategories which also become dreaming and reading the handwriting. You were the first person, and now you are one person, and there is a second person. Explicit sequence learning has been known and studied since the discovery of sequence learning. However, recently, implicit sequence learning has gained more attention and research. A form of implicit learning may be implicit dreaming, maybe a contrary dreaming occurs, maybe dying is more implicit in its sequence, maybe learning refers to the underlying methods of dreaming, or airy spaces, or writing words to both beloveds. The contrary people are unaware of what's explicit and what's implicit. In other words, learning without knowing is dreaming. And I'm going to just end with a piece of prose that C.A. Conrad asked if there were people who wanted to write about death in prose. So it's not a poem. So I'm going to read just a lengthy little block from Jacques Derrida, and then just end with this prose piece. And so it is a statement on complicated spiritual grieving in year 5. And I really wanted to explore feelings of anger. So I feel very self-conscious. I've never read this piece before, and it's pretty straightforward. But this piece is from Derrida. The difference between the who and the what at the heart of love separates the heart. It is often said that love is the movement of the heart. Does my heart move because I love someone who is an absolute singularity, or because I love the way that someone is? Often love starts with some type of seduction. One is attracted because the other is like this or like that. Inversely, love is disappointed and dies when one comes to realize that the other person doesn't merit our love. The other person isn't like this or that. So at the death of love, it appears that one stops loving another, not because of who they are, but because they are such and such. That is to say, the history of love, the heart of love, is divided between the who and what. The question of being, to return to philosophy, because the first question of philosophy is, what is it to be? What is being? The question of being is itself always already divided between who and what. is being someone or something. I speak of it abstractly, but I think that whoever starts to love is in love or stops loving is caught between this division of the who and the what. One wants to be true to someone, singularly, irreplaceably, and one perceives that this someone isn't X or Y. They didn't have the properties, the images that I thought I'd loved. So fidelity is threatened by the difference between the who and the what. That's that long Derrida piece that many of you know. So I'll start this piece. Some of the memories intrude on more neutral ones, sting still 5 years later, and I think about how my love and grieving of your death was interrupted with disappointment, the who and the what at the heart of love. And fidelity changed the circumstances, and I tried to keep it all even, and thus to keep being. I wonder why I don't throw away your socks when I'm angry with you, and I still continue to wear them, those and the black and blue cardigan. I wear it in the early mornings as if we were going to have coffee together. I feel the black and blue of you as a bruise sometimes, and it's because I found more text on your computer this summer. These were bolder, balder, and flirtatious, thorough in giving me a complete timeline of your true absence while I traveled. These are far worse in some ways than the single one I found almost a month after your death. So to add it up, while I was teaching in Vermont that last summer, spending time with my family in Seattle under the atypical rain-free blue sky of July, attending a writing retreat in California, feeling proud to have initiated deep community for myself. You were courting your last hurrah, salacious in your secrecy with your fervent wish and desire, a ravishing young woman who was a deep archetype of the many women before me. I saw in old photos of that nostalgic New York you had before us, your drug-addled portraiture bursting of Jackson Pollock desires. I mentioned a loose deception as a vagary to your daughter, and she said it was all about her. You would only act out because she did not give you the love you craved. Sad to eat these assessments, maybe, but no, she doesn't have to take you on either. It was because you craved an insatiable love, as endless as a blazing circumference. This wasn't Mora or Cinyras. It was all about us, what we lost over the last several years. You didn't see me as a woman anymore, only a matron for your daughter, or only a buffer to the outside world with the sort of pain of how it would unsee you daily. We were dissipating into your addiction, what you lived for, with all the vices carried into the center. I still feel this when I'm wearing your socks, when I sip out of the Veselka mug you missed from New York City, where these original women lived, one who was fished out of the East River after a week with you. Death ended all this very quickly, swiftly, and without the ardor I would have tried to consummate to fix us. And I'm not plunging into the East River nor any water of despair anymore. I withdrew myself. I bred my will out of this schema of what had been so upfront familiar, so I could lose this death grip. Finally, I hope. Thank you.
Another astonishing reading. Thank you so much. And I hear that you and Dodi are having an ongoing conversation. We have 7 minutes left to listen to a part of that conversation. Let's hear it.
We have to approve our muting and unmuting, but we can't do it ourselves. So I have approved it. I don't know. I guess one thing I've been wanting to say to Prageeta, because I never remember to say it, is one time, okay, so somebody I know read Grief Sequence, which I think is like an incredible book. I'm not alone with that. And they said that they didn't feel, the book didn't make them feel empathy. And from my point of view, where those places where it doesn't make you feel empathy is one of its greatest strengths. Because my experience of mourning is you don't give a shit about empathy, right? You're like this other creature. And so it seemed to reflect my experience when I was reading it. Is that?
Yeah, I wish I could have written. I mean, I sort of zeroed in on the complicated grief because Dale was so complicated that I was overwhelmed. I agree with you. I mean, I want to go back. I want to answer this, but I also want to think about the shock you were talking about. The shock just took over, and I felt that you're deeply alone. I don't think you're caring about empathy. You're caring about what is this task at hand? Like, who am I now? And what am I facing by myself now? I mean, for all of Dale's like complications, we were deeply together. Deeply attached. I mean, I just think about you and Kevin and this piece and how it draws me to your domesticity and your activities and your writing life all in this space.
Yeah, he's not very much in this piece, and the first bereaved piece, he's kind of hardly in there at all. And so the third one, I want to have him in it, be more narrative about things that happened. But I think those are, I was just sort of thinking in my writing workshop that I teach privately, one woman's been in there for a long time, and she's part of what she's written is about the kind of sudden death of her boyfriend. And she was talking about how the early stuff is all in the third person because she couldn't handle writing about it in the first person. Like you need some kind of mediation between, and as I told you, we had a long conversation this weekend. So everything we're saying is we've already heard, but the only way I felt like I could write this piece, it was commissioned and I had to write about punk. And it was like having to write about punk is what allowed me the kind of just enough distance from my myself to be able to handle it,
Yeah, I love the way I love the way we arrive at punk. I mean, I love just the thinking about the way in which the emphasis of the screaming babies is. I just love that, and it's kind of a relief in the piece, but it's also the way I just love your observations are so they're soothing. It's like there's a way in which I'm speaking, I'm just imagining for you, but the way way B notices everything around her as a way of kind of creating narrativity. I've always struck by just the way that piece weaves. Yeah. I mean, I know Dodi and I can talk about widowhood and we're thinking about just like states of aloneness or.
Prageeta took it upon herself to become my mentor. Like we'd met a few times in person, but we were not close. And she offered all this like advice. Some of it was kind of off the wall, like you may start feeling really sexual. That's normal. She just would send me these messages, and she sent me this really lovely, lovely cloud-like blanket to comfort myself, which was the best gift I've ever received.
I sent that because I remember my blanket, I bought one and it really grounded me, and the cats could be on it with me. I mean, I know that was probably complicated with the cats, but
I know, cats. Yeah.
But having some things, I know I probably said a lot of, I felt bad. I felt inappropriate with that one, but I also found that people would say things to me. They would try to at least address my isolation, and whatever feelings would come up, so that I didn't feel, freakishly alone with feelings.
Mhm. And I think both of us, like, I think we talked about Joan Didion, because I could not read that Year of Magical Thinking before Kevin died. It was just, I could not imagine even going there in my thoughts. And and the book is really not very good. That's what's so shocking. But the one thing that I got out of it is how Joan Didion was basically saying being okay should not be your goal. The need for you to be okay is how Western culture cannot deal with mourning. And that's been very helpful for me. Like, I'm not trying to create some narrative of redemption privately or publicly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even with this new book of poetry I'm writing, the 1 Mint one is really actually just finding Barnett Newman's paintings on the walls and feeling happy to see them, but not, not this. I don't know if you ever really, you don't recover, you just like become this new or different person, I think, with grief.
I briefly went to a grief workshop after my mom died, and they were saying that when someone dies, it creates a hole in your life, and that the hole never gets smaller. It's just more things fill in around it. And I often think of that. I don't know how true that is, but that's what this rabbi said.
I feel that. I mean, I'm 5 years out now and I still, I, 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 I feel Dale's absence. And even though I'm angry, sometimes I still feel, yeah, I still feel that hole. I mean, I feel really happy to move forward, but it's obviously, I feel forever changed by it.
And
And
yeah,
no,
so
you talked about things changing, too, friendships and people and all that stuff. But yeah,
so to bring it back to writing, did you feel that going through that experience of widowhood did change the way you wrote?
I hadn't written prose poems before. I hadn't written in this style at all. I mean, I might have, yeah, I did not recognize this style before. So the prose poem just appeared to
And
me.
so how do you think it worked for you?
Um, I don't think these are really necessarily essays. I think that they feel compact and compressed the
No.
way poetry does. But I hadn't kind of really thought to try to document as much as I could and to still allow my brain to sift through however it was imagining, kind of qualities. So I just don't
Yeah.
write. I'm more of lyric. I am more of a lyric poet, an experimental lyric poet, but not this.
You can see it in some of the pieces. I mean, they would vary. Some of them I'd read through and I get it, but some of them I would read through and then I would feel like the ground was pulled out. I get to the end and I'm like, I would feel really stupid because I couldn't, then I would read it out loud, like just trying to, and I kind of like that I had to like kind of, it's almost like a dream that's erasing itself. I had to chase after some of them to get their meaning.
Well, I love the way you said that erasing, like that line with Kevin appearing in a dream. And I just, I mean, well, I mean, if we had a longer time, I would love to, because I think my students are also watching this, love for you to talk about new narrative and writing, you know, as you were grieving and during this period, if, if it changed for you.
I don't think, I just think there's a big difference between the first bereaved piece was written like a month after Kevin died. I cannot believe that I managed to do that, but it was an art catalog for the KW in Berlin for the Christina Ramberg show, and they said they wanted a piece of experimental fiction based on the psychology of her work, and it was just too. It's almost like one of those things where you cannot believe anybody would pay you to do something so great. So I did that, and that piece is really like, it's really demented and kind of doesn't, it's not as tight as my writing usually is. So there's this openness and this kind of just this rawness that's going through it. So, and then now I'm kind of more human. Like I was, it almost I was practically not human when I wrote it, and the way I normally conceive of myself as human. And so now I'm like a lot more human, and I felt like writing the second piece, it healed a lot. I mean, I wasn't intending to write it to heal anything, but I felt like I got hold of some stuff. So that's why I feel like the third piece can be more like kind of narrative and tell the story of what happened, you know, because writing about loss, it seemed like it really had to be the thing that I was mourning had to be absent. So it wouldn't be that much about him. So it sounds very kind of self-indulgent in a way. Do you know what I mean? And,
No, it sounds so true.
well, good.
Yeah. I mean, you know, like that's what's so hard to talk about is that absence.
Mm-hmm.
And you're, you know, I, yeah, I just, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I mean, I just loved listening to you read this piece.
No, it's been very helpful knowing you.
Oh, I am so grateful. I mean, I remember when you and Kevin came to Brown in 90, was it 94, 95? That's because I was a first year, or no, I was a second year. Yeah. So I have, I mean, I have these just really fond memories of your readings and your world while I was a grad student. So, I mean,
Guys,
I,
yeah. Brown was incredible then. Like everybody in that your cohort has gone on to be somebody in the world. It's kind of like the Donna in my piece is Donna de la Perriere, who you must have known at Brown.
I
So
did I was there right before I got there.
yeah.
But I know, I mean, I know her work and I know, I don't think she and I have met, but I know her work and
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, like the Brown didn't bring us. It was the grad students who brought us, which is kind of typical. I'm kind of more like the grad students ask rather than the faculty. But
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, I remember Steve and Jennifer hosting you, and that was, I mean, I think that was just, there's, we should, it would be great to spend some time on just thinking about like just how mythical it was to have you both visit then and you at that time, and just what it how it impressed on me all these years. And I just loved reading everything, knowing that that was where it started for me in reading your work.
mhm. So should we let people ask questions if they want?
Sure. Yes.
So you guys tell us how this works. Poetry Center? Do we do it in the chat?
I think if we had, there's nothing in the Q&A, so I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also,
Oh, and I don't know if we have to end soon, which is what.
yeah, we have to. It's well, it usually ends at 8.
Yes.
So we went after. And it was so great to hear you. Thank you so much for your conversations, for sharing that, and for all your writing and sharing that. And I guess it's time to say goodbye. I want to